Neville Goddard, Awakened Imagination, Chapter 2, Sealed Instructions. The first power that meets us at the threshold of the soul's domain is the power of imagination. Dr. Franz Hartmann. I was first made conscious of the power, nature, and redemptive function of imagination through the teachings of my friend Abdullah. And through subsequent experiences, I learned that Jesus was a symbol of the coming of imagination to man. That the test of his birth in man was the individual's ability to forgive sin. That is, his ability to identify himself or another with his aim in life. Wow. Now that's what he learned from Abdullah. What kind of man was Abdullah? And I know, and through different sources of Neville lectures, that is, that a lot of people would seek out Abdullah for his teachings and lessons, and including rabbis in secret. They would seek out Abdullah for lessons to learn more. And I believe he literally knew Hebrew and he knew the Old Testament very, very well. But what he just said right there is profound. I learned that Jesus was a symbol of the coming imagination to man. That the test of his, capital H-I-S, his birth in man was the individual's ability to forgive sin. That is, his ability to identify himself or another with his aim in life. Without the identification of man with his aim, the forgiveness of sin is an impossibility. And only the Son of God can forgive sin. Therefore, man's ability to identify himself with his aim, though reason and his senses deny it, is proof of the birth of Christ in him. To passively surrender to appearances and bow before the evidence of facts is to confess that Christ is not yet born in you. Oh my goodness. I am all that is God right here. All self-concepts, me, you, her, him, mother, father, brother, sister. Here's your current self-concept. Here's the self-concept you want to be. Without the identification of man with his aim, the forgiveness of sin is an impossibility. If you listen to your desire, you go into the closet, you shut the door, you listen to I am, you find out what your desire is, now you know your aim. Without the identification of that, the forgiveness of sin is an impossibility, meaning forgiveness of sin means objectification of your desire, which means once you make the impression, the objectification happens. The inability to find out what your desire is going to lack the forgiveness of sin. Without the identification of man with his aim, the forgiveness of sin is an impossibility, and the Son, and only the Son of God can forgive him. Can forgive sin. Only the Son of God can forgive sin. Therefore, man's ability to identify himself with his aim, though reason and his senses deny it, is proof of the birth of Christ in him. Once you realize how this works, that's the birth of Christ in you. Once you take it for granted and you try this and you see it work just for the parking space, just for the coffee, just for the kiss on your cheek, whatever. Once you see it work once, this is the birth of the Christ in you. To passively surrender to appearances and bow before the evidence of the facts, these facts, is to confess that Christ is not yet born in you. If you're looking for how, you've bowed before the facts, and you're not at that place yet. It doesn't mean you can't be, you're just not there yet. But you must listen to this again. Although this teaching shocked and repelled me at first, for I was a convinced and earnest Christian, and did not know then and did not then know that Christianity could not be inherited by the mere accident of birth, but must be consciously adopted as a way of life. It stole later on, through visions, mystical revelations, and practical experiences into my understandings, and found its interpretation in a deeper mood. But I must confess that it is a trying time when those things are shaken, which one has only taken for granted. Seest thou these great buildings? There shall not be left one stone upon another that shall not be thrown down. Mark 13:2. Not one stone of literal understanding will be left after one drinks the water of psychological meaning. All that has been built up by the natural religion is cast into flames of mental fire. Yet, what better way is there to understand Jesus Christ than to identify the central character of the Gospels with human imagination? Knowing that every time you exercise your imagination lovingly on behalf of another, you are literally mediating God to man, and thereby feeding and clothing Christ Jesus. And that whenever you imagine evil against another, you are literally beating and crucifying Christ Jesus. Oh my goodness. Oh man, oh manifestation, oh manifestation. Let's repeat this very long sentence, and it's profound. Oh my gosh, it's so profound. Are we that responsible and irresponsible? Do the innocents really know not what they're doing? I got to repeat this whole paragraph, and I didn't finish it. There's another sentence to go, but let's start over. Not one stone of literal understanding will be left after one drinks the water of psychological meaning. That's what this is. All that has been built up by natural religion is cast into the flames of mental fire once you go down and understand this. Yet what better way is there to understand Christ Jesus than to identify the central character of the Gospels with human imagination? Knowing that every time you exercise your imagination lovingly on behalf of another, you are literally mediating God to man and thereby feeding and clothing Christ Jesus. And that whenever you imagine evil against another, you are literally beating and crucifying Christ Jesus. Every imagination of man is either the cup of cold water or the sponge of vinegar to the parched lips of Christ. Oh boy. That is a lot to swallow. I hope you're up to the task. Yes, that is your responsibility, what you put here. You are in charge of your thoughts and your feelings. Have you done the homework? Have you thought about, well, how are you reacting to what's going on? How are you reacting to the thoughts? Are you busy beating and crucifying Christ Jesus? Because that's right here. Or are you feeding and clothing? Is it a cup of cold water or is it vinegar? Let none of you imagine evil in your hearts against his neighbor. Let none of you imagine evil in your hearts against his neighbor. You can't afford it. You cannot afford it. If there's anything you cannot afford, and we're not even talking about money, you can't afford to do that. That will rob you. That will keep you in the poorhouse of spirituality. Let none of you imagine evil in your hearts against his neighbor, warned the prophet Zechariah. When man heeds this advice, he will awake from the imposed sleep of Adam into the full consciousness of the Son of God. There it is. You want to wake up? It's that simple. He is in the world, and the world is made by him, and the world knows him not. Human imagination. I ask myself many times, if my imagination is Christ Jesus and all things are possible to Christ Jesus, are all things possible to me? I ask myself many times, quotes Neville, in quotes, Neville writes in his own book, if my imagination is Christ Jesus and all things are possible to Christ Jesus, are all things possible to me? Through experience, I have come to know that when I identify myself with my aim in life, then Christ is awake in me. Christ is sufficient for all things. When I identify myself with my aim in life, Christ is available to me. Through experience, I have come to know that when I identify myself with my aim in life, then Christ is awake in me. I do not even want to admit how much effort I put down this road of trying to understand what my aim was, except to be a teacher of this information and doing the deeper dive constantly through the decades, all the time, seeing the interpretation, seeing the motivation, understanding continually, deeper, 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 trial and tribulations, deeper, 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 trials and tribulations, and then realizing the whole time I'm living the aim. If you're not having an easy time figuring out your aim, just go back. Just revert back into the I am meditation. Close the door to your closet. Take some deep breaths. I am. I am. I am. What is it I am? What do I like? What is it that would make me happy? You have to know your objective. You have to know your aim. When you know your aim, you know that it is a desire inside of you that came from Him that only you could have anyway. And then once you have that desire figured out, then now you start to make the impressions by bringing your focus down that road directly at your desire. Only you could have that desire in that way. No one else can have it. Once you know it, then you know Christ Jesus in you is available. There's so much wonder in these first couple sentences. I lay down my life that I might take it up again. No man taketh it from me, but I lay it down of myself. John 10:18. What a comfort it is to know that all that I experience is the result of my own standards of beliefs, that I am the center of my own web of circumstances, and that as I change, so must my outer world. The world presents different appearances according as our states of consciousness differ. What we see when we are identified with a state cannot be seen when we are no longer fused with it. What we see when we are identified with a state cannot be seen when we are no longer fused with it. Once you impress your subconscious with your desire, once you figured out your desire, which is your objective, which is your goal, which is going to fulfill you and make you happy, you're now expressing Christ Jesus. Once you figure that out and you objectify your new reality, you can no longer see this. What we see when we are identified with a state cannot be seen when we are no longer fused with it. When you're here, you cannot see when you're no longer fused with this old self-concept, you're here, you can't see that anymore, nor should you care, nor should you try. Do not look back like Lot's wife, or become a pillar of salt, preserved. By state is meant all that man believes and consents to as true. No idea presented to the mind can realize itself unless the mind accepts it. It depends on the acceptance, the state with which we are identified, how things present themselves. In the fusion of imagination and states is to be found the shaping of the world as it seems. Very important word. Seems. The world is a revelation of the states with which imagination is fused. It is the state from which we think that determines the objective world in which we live. The rich man, the poor man, the good man, the thief are what they are by virtue of the states from which they view the world. On the distinction between these states depends the distinction between the worlds of these men. Individually so different is the same world. It is not the actions and behavior of the good man that should be matched, but his point of view. Outer reforms are useless if the inner state is not changed. Outer reforms in the world are useless if the inner state is not changed. Success is gained not by imitating the outer actions of the successful, but by right inner actions and inner talkings. Outer reforms are useless if the inner state is not changed. There's a lot of noise out here. Just turn on that little box and you'll see the noise that comes and spews out of it. I don't know if you remember these little, the antenna ears there, rabbit ears or whatever they were called. That little box has a lot of noise. You're either watching Hallmark Channel and learning about romance so you can become married, or you're watching some other noise out of that little box, and that noise is not doing you any justice. Outer reforms are useless. That's outer. If the inner state is not changed. Success is gained by not imitating the outer actions of the successful, but by right inner actions and inner talkings. Inner talkings happening when you're listening to your desire and you have that urge to make that impression. This is where inner talking's happening, not out here. If we detach ourselves from a state, and we may at any moment, the conditions and circumstances to which that union gave being vanish. I was in the fall of 1933 in New York City that I approached. It was in the fall of 1933 in New York City that I approached Abdullah with a problem. He asked me one simple question: what do you want? Now that is exactly what you should be asking everybody around you. What do you want? And they might not have ever heard that from you. And they're talking and they're grieving or they're commiserating about something. And you say, well, what do you want? Because when you know what they want, now you can imagine lovingly. Because you know what they're after. You know what their aim is. So you're going to bring them up, which brings you up. He asked me one simple question: what do you want? I told him that I would like to spend the winter in Barbados, but that I was broke. I literally did not have a nickel. If you will imagine yourself to be in Barbados, said he, thinking and viewing the world from that state of consciousness instead of thinking of Barbados, you will spend the winter there. Let me repeat. This is all a quote, so I better repeat it properly. When Neville says he literally did not have a nickel in 1933, remember he was born, he's 18 years old. He was born in 1902, so it's 1905, excuse me. So that's 28 years old, excuse me. I'm all off on my numbers. My numbers are all over the place. I literally did not have a nickel. Remember, he was a dancer. So at this time, he's met Abdullah. He's starting to learn from Abdullah. And I believe what happened was his parents left New York and were sailing off to Barbados after he admitted to them he didn't want to go back to Barbados with them. And they were sailing off to Barbados. And as the ship left, he became overwhelmed with the feeling, I got to go to Barbados. I want to go to Barbados. This overwhelming feeling, where did that come from? Did it come from his mom imagining him home? There's always that. He didn't have a nickel to his name. Unemployed dancer, 1933. Remember, the Depression's either ending or is in full swing at this moment. What do you want? I told him I would like to spend the winter in Barbados, but that I was broke and I literally did not have a nickel. Here comes Abdullah's response. If you will imagine yourself to be in Barbados, said he, thinking and viewing the world from that state of consciousness instead of thinking of Barbados, you will spend the winter there. You must not concern yourself with the ways and means of getting there. For the state of consciousness of already being in Barbados, if occupied by your imagination, will devise the means best suited to realize itself. Man lives by committing himself to invisible states by fusing his imagination with what he knows to be other than himself. And in this union, he experiences the results of that fusion. No one can lose what he has save by detachment from the state where the things experienced have their natural life. You must imagine yourself right into the state of your fulfilled desire, Abdullah told me, and fall asleep viewing the world from Barbados. The world which we describe from observation must be as we describe it relative to ourselves. Our imagination connects us with the state desired, but we must use imagination masterfully, not as an onlooker thinking of the end, but as a partaker thinking from the end. We must actually be there in imagination. If we do this, our subjective experience will be realized objectively. This is not mere fancy, said he, but a truth you can prove by experience. His appeal to enter into the wish fulfilled was the secret of thinking from the end. Every state is already there as mere possibility. Every state already exists as mere possibility. As long as you think of it, but is overpoweringly real when you think from it. Thinking from the end is the way of Christ. Remember, does it feel natural? And if it doesn't feel natural, you need it to feel natural, because that's how thinking from the end is the way of Christ. That's how you enter that. I began right there and then fixing my thoughts beyond the limits of sense, beyond that aspect to which my present state gave being, toward the feeling of already being in Barbados and viewing the world from that standpoint. He emphasized the importance of the state from which man views the world as he falls asleep. All prophets claim that the voice of God is chiefly heard by man in dreams. This is why they're very, very important to study. And we will get into that on this channel, I promise you. It's one of my favorites. One of my favorites. We will be getting into that. In a dream, in a vision of the night, when deep sleep falleth upon men, in slumberings upon the bed, then he openeth the ears of men and sealeth their instruction. Job 33, 15, 16. That night and for several nights thereafter, I fell asleep in the assumption that I was in my father's house in Barbados. Within a month, I received a letter from my brother saying that he had a strong desire to have the family together at Christmas and asking me to use the enclosed steamship ticket for Barbados. I sailed 2 days after I received my brother's letter and spent a wonderful winter in Barbados. This is very abridged. It goes into more detail, and I won't dig in right now, but it's a very good story. Basically, he went back to a quick commercial, because you'll hear it in a lecture somewhere. He went back to Abdullah and said, "Hey, it's not happening, and I'm not there yet. They haven't contacted me." And Abdullah walked away from Neville and said, what do you mean? Talk about you're not going to be going to Barbados. You are already in Barbados." Turned around, walked away from Neville, and slammed the door to his office, basically. I can't tell you how many times I got my ass chewed by my teacher. What Abdullah did to Neville here in this story, my teacher, when I came to her, I was a wreck. Probably just like Neville to Abdullah. I mean, going off in all directions. And she, like Abdullah to Neville, would give me the business just like that. Just very forceful tone, very loud voice, yelling, was involved, never any hazing. But yes, I got my ass chewed out quite a bit. And I am so thankful for those ass chewings, because they brought me out of my deep, deep slumber. I obviously wanted to be out of that slumber, and that's why I went to her. But exactly what Neville did, it's not in the book here, but it's exactly what Abdullah did in teaching Neville a lesson, helped him go deeper by being forceful and yelling and walking away and saying, "You're already in Barbados." This experience has convinced me that man can be anything he pleases if he will make the conception habitual and think from the end. It has also shown me that I can no longer excuse myself by placing the blame on the world of external things, that my good and my evil have no dependency except from myself, that it depends on the state from which I view the world, how things present themselves. It depends on the state from which I view the world, how things present themselves. Man who is free in his choice acts man who is free in his choice acts from conceptions which he freely, though not always wisely, chooses. Boy, that sentence needs my attention. Let me go back. Man who is free in his choice acts from conceptions which he freely, though not always wisely, chooses. All conceivable states are awaiting our choice and occupancy, but no amount of rationalizing will of itself yield us the state of consciousness, which is the only thing worth having. The state of consciousness here, but all these states are available. This is a wonderful sentence. All conceivable states, all of them, are awaiting our choice and occupancy, but no amount of rationalizing. Out here, that's where rationalization exists. No amount of rationalizing will of itself yield us the state of consciousness, which is the only thing worth having. The state of consciousness of that, which is the only thing worth having if you want to leave this one. This rationalization is not going to cut it. You can go all the way around here and sniff around up there at that other, where you see someone else doing it, but you're not going to get there. The state of consciousness, which is the only thing worth having. The imaginative image is the only thing to seek. The imaginative image is the only thing to seek. The ultimate purpose of imagination is to create in us the spirit of Jesus, which is continual forgiveness of sin, continual identification of man with his ideal. Only by identifying ourselves with our aim can we forgive ourselves for having missed it. There is a wonderful, wonderful sentence. Only by identifying ourselves with our aim, our desire is trying to tell us what our aim is. Only by identifying ourselves with our aim can we forgive ourselves for having missed it, which is a sin. All else is labor in vain. On this path to whatever place or state we convey our imagination, to that place or state we will gravitate physically also. On this path, whatever place or state we convey our imagination, to that place or state, we will gravitate physically also. Wherever you send your imagination is where you will follow. Isn't it nice? Doesn't it feel like, oh man, all I got to do is figure that out? You mean all I have to do is that? It's that simple? If I'm here, and here I am, a thousandaire, a millionaire, a billionaire, a trillionaire, all I have to do is make my consciousness shift over here. That's it? Well, how can I learn this? How can I learn to shift my consciousness to the state of my objective, of my aim? Do I want to be single forever, or do I want to be married? If I want to be married, if that's my aim, how do I work with my consciousness to become that consciousness? I make the impression while I fall asleep. That's the fastest way you can do it, or in your meditation, or before your nap, or after your nap, or when you wake up. You have at least 4 or 5 windows a day. Assuming you take a nap, or if you do meditation. You have at least 2 or 3 a day, assuming you're going to fall asleep as one, waking up as another. Let's say you just quiet your mind, do your I am. There's another one. You have at least 3. You have a minimum of 2 for sure, because you're sleeping every day. That's quite many. You don't need more than that, actually. But if you want to put the pedal down and get there, you want to be self-persuaded. You must put the effort in. No one's going to do it for you. It's not hard effort. There's no sweat. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you, and if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you unto myself, that where I am, there ye may be also. John 14:2, one of my favorite quotes. By sleeping in my Father's house in my imagination, as though I slept there in the flesh, I fused my imagination with the state and was compelled to experience that state in the flesh also. So vivid was this state to me, I could have been seen in my Father's house had any sensitive entered the room where in imagination I was sleeping. Neville literally went there. He remotely viewed himself there. A sensitive means anybody who could pick up on him being there. Most likely, and also people in his family who are familiar with his consciousness. Your siblings and your relatives, you're very familiar because you're in life together for a reason. You have a familiarity, and as Seth describes, you also have a past together that goes beyond the current life. We'll get into that more later. There's a lot to unbury on that one, but this is a good chapter. A man can be seen where in imagination he is, for a man must be where his imagination is, for his imagination is himself. That's why, as I've said before, if you're spending time focused on the past or you're spending time focused on the future and not focusing in your now, you're present here. So where your imagination is absent. The lights are on, but no one's home. If you're over in the past, where's your imagination? Where then must you be? You're not present. It doesn't matter. The past doesn't exist. The only time is now. There's only now. There is no past and there is no future. But if you're spending your imagination on an illusion called the past, or you're spending your imagination on an illusion called the future, then you're not home. The lights are on, but nobody's home. In imagination, you are in fantasy of the past or the future, but when you come back here and you turn the lights back on and off again, you're like, hey, you have nothing to show for your absence. You were gone and you came back and nothing to show for your absence. Nothing happened here because you weren't home, imagining the state of your objective. You weren't in imagination figuring out your aim, figuring out what you wanted to be, and then impressing that and then becoming that. You were gone. You were out here. You were in the world of past and future illusions. This I know from experience, for I have been seen by a few to whom I desired to be seen when physically I was 100 miles away. A man can be seen where in imagination he is, for a man must be where his imagination is, for imagination is himself. Excuse me. I, by the intensity of my imagination and feeling, imagining and feeling myself to be in Barbados, instead of merely thinking of Barbados, had spanned the vast Atlantic to influence my brother into desiring my presence to complete the family circle at Christmas. Everybody was going to be there at Christmas. All of his brothers and sisters and his parents, and it was the last opportunity for all of them to be together. Some had gone to college and lived abroad, etc., etc. Thinking from the end, from the feeling of my wish fulfilled, was the source of everything that happened as outer cause, such as my brother's impulse. His brother thought it was an original idea to himself to send me a steamship ticket, first class, and it was also the cause of everything that appeared as results. In Ideas of Good and Evil, page 35, W.B. Yeats, having described a few experiences similar to this experience of mine, writes, if all who have described events like this have not dreamed, we should rewrite our histories. For all men, certainly all imaginative men, must be forever casting forth enchantments, glamour, illusions, and all men, especially tranquil men, who have no powerful egotistic life, must be continually passing under their power. Passing under their power, that means if you're passing under their power, you're the automaton. Either you're using your imagination or someone else is. And if you're not figuring out what your aim is, your unique, wonderful aim, which is only available to you and can only be done by you, that aim, that desire, that fulfillment is not going to be done by anybody else. There might be similar ones in the world out here, or desired by others, or out here look similar, but none can be as valuable as yours. None. None, none, none. If you're using your imagination and you're working on this and you're going for your objective, remember, you've already done this many, many times. You're here, you got here. You didn't just get pushed here like a bird out of the nest. But even that, I don't even want to. Amazing that a bird can be pushed into flight. Wow. But same thing here. You're pushed into consciousness, aren't you? I and my Father are one. You're pushed in. So now we have to consciously wake up to this skill set, put it to use. But back to the idea, if you don't know your aim and you're not making this impression, the world and all of its wares is so happy to take this space that you're not using and give you the influence to objectify what they want you to possess, buy, purchase, loan, etc., etc., etc. Because you left the gate open. You left the gate open. You're not seeking through desire what is your aim so you can make the influence or make the impression. So the gate's open because you're not even bothered with desire. You don't even know what, I don't know. My mom and dad told me to go be a lawyer. Okay, I'll just go do that. Well, you're not listening to your desire. So that therefore you're working your butt off out here, but there's also something else occupying this space. But when you turn it around and you start using your imagination, this can't have a foothold in your subconscious anymore. Therefore, what happens is you end up objectifying your unique desire. Repeating this paragraph, very most important paragraph, this is by Yeats, W.B. Yeats. If all who have described events like this have not dreamed, we should rewrite our histories. For all men, certainly all imaginative men, men who do this, must be forever casting forth enchantments, glamour, illusions, and all men, especially tranquil men, meaning passive men, meaning people who don't listen to their desires, don't listen to their intuition, don't want to make the impression here. And all men, especially tranquil men who have no powerful egotistic life, must be continually passing under their power. They become the automatons. This person here not listening to their desire or figuring out what it is or making the impression is going to be the automaton for the one who is using his imagination. It's very important. Determined imagination, thinking from the end, is the beginning of all miracles. I would like to give you an immense belief in miracles, but a miracle is only the name given by those who have no knowledge of the power and function of imagination to the works of imagination. Imagining oneself into the feeling of the wish fulfilled is the means by which a new state is entered. This gives the state the quality of isness. Is. Hermes tells us, that which is manifested. That which has been or shall be is unmanifested, but not dead. For soul, the eternal activity of God, animates all things. Wow. The future must become the present in the imagination of the one who would wisely and consciously create circumstances. We must translate vision into being, thinking of into thinking from. Imagination must center itself in some state and view the world from that state. Thinking from the end is an intense perception of the world of fulfilled desire. Thinking from the state desired is creative living. Ignorance of this ability to think from the end is bondage. It is the root of all bondage with which man is bound. To passively surrender to the evidence of the senses underestimates the capacity of the inner self. Once man accepts thinking from the end as a creative principle in which he can cooperate, then he is redeemed from the absurdity of ever attempting to achieve his objective by merely thinking of it. You have to think from it. You can't think of it. It has to be from it. From it means first person. Seeing your arms in the activity of doing it, driving a car or whatever, holding your wife, holding your husband. With your arms, first person, feeling it. Construct all ends according to the pattern of fulfilled desire. The whole of life is just the appeasement of hunger. It's very fascinating, this piece right here. The whole of life is just the appeasement of hunger. All these self-concepts we travel through we're just trying to appease hunger. If you're here and you have a desire to be here, that is a hunger. If you're here and you have a desire to be there, that is a hunger. If you're here and you have a desire to be there, etc., it's a hunger. The whole of life is just the appeasement of hunger. And the infinite states of consciousness, right, from which a man can view the world are purely a means of satisfying that hunger. The principle upon which each state is organized is some form of hunger to lift the passion for self-gratification to ever higher and higher levels of experience. Desire is the mainspring of the mental machinery. It is a blessed thing. It is a right and natural craving which has a state of consciousness as its right and natural satisfaction. But one thing I do, forgetting the things which are behind and stretching forward to the things which are before, I press on toward the goal. Philippians 3:13. That is a great quote. Repeatable. But one thing I do, forgetting the things which are behind and stretching forward to the things which are before, I press on toward the goal. If you're here, that's the goal. And then you forget the things that are behind. If you're here and you want to be here, that's the goal. Then you forget the things that are behind because you become. It is necessary to have an aim in life. Without an aim, we drift. What wantest thou of me? Is the implied question asked most often by the central figure of the Gospels. In defining your aim, you must want it. As the hart panteth after the water brooks, so panteth my soul after thee, O God. Psalms 42:1. It is lack of this passionate direction to life that makes man fail of accomplishment. The spanning of the bridge between desire, thinking of, and satisfaction, thinking from, is all important. We must move mentally from thinking of the end to thinking from the end. This reason could never do. This reason could never do. Reason is one of the objects in the world. By its nature, it is restricted to the evidence of the senses, reason. But imagination, having no such limitation, can. Desire exists to be gratified in the activity of imagination. Desire in you exists to be gratified in the activity of imagination. Just closing your eyes, just imagining. Even with your eyes open. You can imagine easily with your eyes open all day long. Through imagination, man escapes from the limitation of the senses and the bondage of reason. There is no stopping the man who can think from the end. There is no stopping the man who can think from the end. Wherever you are on this sliding scale of doing this for yourself, persist for sure, and I've said that before, but when you can think from the end, you become not just Christ Jesus, but you become a master manifester. Nothing can stop him. He creates the means and grows his way out of limitation into ever greater and greater mansions of the Lord. It does not matter what he has been or what he is. All that matters is, what does he want? He knows that the world is a manifestation of the mental activity which goes on within himself. So he strives to determine and control the ends from which he thinks. In his imagination, he dwells in the end, confident that he shall dwell there in the flesh also. He puts his whole trust in the feeling of the wish fulfilled and lives by committing himself to that state. For the art of fortune is to tempt him so to do. Like the man at the pool of Bethesda, he is ready for the moving of the waters of imagination, knowing that every desire is ripe grain to him who knows how to think from the end. He is indifferent to mere reasonable probability and confident that through his continuous imagination, his assumptions will harden into fact. Very, very important sentence. You're not just going to get one probable version. You're going to get the one you focus on from the end. I'll repeat the sentence. Knowing that every desire is ripe grain to him who knows how to think from the end, he is indifferent to mere reasonable probability and confident that through continuous imagination, his assumptions will harden into fact. You can have whatever you want. It doesn't matter how improbable it is. But how to persuade men everywhere that thinking from the end is the only living, how to foster it in every activity of man, how to reveal it as the plenitude of life and not the compensation of the disappointed, that is the problem. You don't have to tell me. I didn't just start that kind of persuading yesterday. Life is a controllable thing. You can experience what you please once you realize that you are his son. Capital his, capital son. Life is a controllable thing. You can experience what you please once you realize that you are his son, and that you are what you are by virtue of the state of consciousness from which you think and view the world. Son, thou art ever with me, and all that I have is thine. Luke 15:31. There are so many wonderful pieces in this one chapter, but just the quotes, I mean, they really are the frosting, every single one of them. I'm just gonna repeat some. The first power that meets us at the threshold of the soul's domain is the power of imagination. Dr. Franz Hartmann. Let none of you imagine evil in your hearts against his neighbor. I lay down my life that I might take it again. No man taketh it from me, but I lay it down myself. I lay down my life that I might take it again. No man taketh it from me, but I lay it down myself. Oh, deliciousness. Oh, they're just all good and wonderful. Son, this is the topper of it all. Son, thou art ever with me, and all that I have is thine. Son, all that ever with me. Thou art ever with me. Son, thou art ever with me. All that I have is thine. Oh my gosh. What was your favorite part? If you had any, put them in the comments. Wow. Chapter 2, Awakened Imagination. Sealed Instructions. We'll see you in the next chapter.